under the midday Philadelphia sun. The bar looked stripped and weary, without the amber neon glow or the roar of rock and roll. It was just an old brick building with peeling paint. Elena stood across the street, staring at the closed wooden doors, feeling utterly out of place. "Hey, Professor, you planning to stand there until opening time? Or are you just studying the vintage architecture?" A familiar voice, deep and raspy, called out from right across the way. Elena jolted, spinning around. Jaxson was standing in front of a small garage, tucked behind the rows of brick buildings. He didn't have that suave, late-night bartender look anymore. This time, he wore a grease-stained gray t-shirt, his knuckles wrapped in white athletic tape, and an unlit cigarette dangled loosely from his lips. "Jaxson," Elena exhaled, stepping toward him. You work here." Jaxson smirked, wiping his oil-slicked hands on a dirty rag. "This is my home base. The bar is just a side hustle." "What are you doing in this neck of the woods at this hour? I figured you'd be wielding a scalpel or squinting into a microscope by now." "I just finished class," Elena stammered, trying to evade his piercing gaze. "I was just passing through. Are you doing okay? I mean, after that late shift last night?" Still breathing, Jaxson shrugged, his eyes scanning her weary expression. "But you don't look so hot. You look like you just lost your best friend. Something happened." It was a motorcycle shop, but it didn't look like your typical grimy mechanic's garage. The exposed brick walls were accented with artistic, rusted vintage signs. Old tires had been repurposed into lush planters, and behind large glass panes sat heavy-duty bikes, polished until they gleamed like sculptures. "Not bad, right? Took me a year to make." This scrap metal looked like a place fit for humans. "Welcome, Professor," Jaxson smirked, drying his hands with an old cotton towel. "Welcome to the gearhead's den. My real job is diagnosing these machines. Mixology is just a midnight hobby." He stepped closer, his steel blue eyes lingering on Elena's outfit. Today, she wore wide-leg beige trousers paired with a cream turtleneck and a thin ash-gray cardigan. It was a look of extreme simplicity, yet it radiated a strange, quiet elegance. "You're very minimalist today," Jaxson noted, an eyebrow arching in a subtle, raspy compliment. "Most people around here wear every color in the rainbow to stand out, but you know how to turn these plain shades into something with real style. It suits you." Elena soft, but not easily washed away. Elena flushed slightly, the brief flutter of embarrassment helping her forget her loneliness for a moment. "Thank you. I just threw on something comfortable for school." Noticing that Elena's brow was still slightly furrowed, and her eyes held a nameless sorrow, Jaxson didn't ask her directly. He jerked his chin toward the bar across the street and then turned back to her. "You look like you just escaped a 24-hour shift. Or did Professor Miller give you a taste of hell with a pop quiz?" Usually, people with sleepy eyes like those are having trouble with a person, not a pile of textbooks. Jackson's intuition struck a nerve deep within Elena. She sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Actually, it's about Skylar. She's been acting so strange since this morning. She skipped class, hasn't said a word to me, and won't answer my texts. I thought since you two are close, you might know what made her so upset." The bustle of the Philadelphia streets seemed to recede, giving way to a heavy silence between them. Jaxson listened to Elena's confession, a corner of his mouth twitching at her foolishly sincere heart. "She skipped class, and you think it's your fault." Jaxson let out a short laugh, a sound filled with a mix of exasperation and mockery that Elena couldn't quite decipher. Inwardly, Jaxson found the whole situation absurdly twisted. It was Skylar, the confident one, the one who had approached him with that calculated ambiguity and thrown the challenge on the table to initiate this bet, all because she wanted back in with him, who was now trembling with jealousy. She had underestimated Elena's latent beauty, and now that her prey was beginning to shine under Jackson's lead, Skylar was throwing a tantrum like a child stripped of her favorite toy. Jaxson didn't care one bit about mending their friendship. To him, the bond between these two girls was like a machine assembled with the wrong parts. Sooner or later, it was bound to explode. However, if Skylar kept acting out, Elena would retreat back into her bookworm shell and stop coming around. Then the very game currently fueling his excitement would end in a dull fizzle. He needed Skylar to shut up, and the best way to tame a thrashing leopard was to drag it out into the light. Jaxson took another step closer, his steel-blue eyes softening as he donned a mask of understanding. Listen, Elena, Skylar tends to dramatize things. She's not mad at you. She's just mad at herself over something, he said, his voice as deep and warm as an old blues record. Don't let this ruin your day. I have a suggestion. He paused, wiping the last smear of oil from his hand, and looked her straight in the eye. Tonight, bring her here. Don't go into the bar. Just bring her by my shop. I'll talk to her privately. I know how to handle that stubborn streak of hers. We'll get it all sorted out, and by tomorrow, you'll have your chatty best friend back. Deal? Elena looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with hope. You can really do that. I just don't want her staying silent like this forever. Trust me, Jaxson smirked, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm very good at fixing broken things, whether it's an engine or a girl's mood. Inside Jax's head, a different plan was taking shape. He wanted Skylar to witness Elena gradually becoming part of this world, not just to taunt her, but to make Skylar realize she had lost the moment she started. He needed her to stand still and play the role of the best friend perfectly so he could continue his thrilling hunt for the nursing student. When Elena stepped into the dorm room, the atmosphere inside remained thick with tension, like a guitar string stretched to its limit, just waiting to snap. Skylar was sprawled on her bed, her eyes glued to her phone screen. Yet her strained and irritable expression betrayed the fact that she wasn't paying attention to a thing. Elena's footsteps echoed softly, but they were met only with a silence steeped in resentment. Elena made a few clumsy attempts at conversation, a question about the audition, an invitation to dinner, but they all vanished into the void. Skylar responded only with cold snorts or cruel indifference. Guilt and anxiety made Elena feel as though she were walking on thin ice. She realized that, for Skylar, silence was the most effective weapon of torture. Having no other choice, Elena slipped out onto the balcony, her fingers trembling as she texted Jaxson. Can you call her? Things are worse than I thought. I really don't know what to do anymore. Only a few minutes later, Skylar's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and instantly, her aggressive demeanor vanished, replaced by a mix of confusion and a pitiful sense of hope. Skylar hurried to her feet, walked straight into the bathroom, and locked the door. The next morning, the Philadelphia sunlight poured into the room like a soothing balm. Elena woke up with the lingering remnants of the previous night's anxiety, but she was stunned to find Skylar standing before the mirror, makeup brush in hand, humming a tune by the Velvet Underground. There wasn't a single trace left of the coldness or the spiteful door slamming. Skylar turned around and flashed a radiant smile. That trademark smile that used to make Elena feel so welcome. Good morning, Elle. How long were you planning on sleeping in? I've already brewed the coffee. The sudden transformation left Elena speechless. She didn't know what kind of miracle drug Jaxson had administered during that phone call last night, but its effectiveness was almost chilling. A spark of curiosity flickered within her. She wanted to ask, to delve into what they had said to each other. However, partly out of sensitivity and partly because she didn't want to intrude on someone else's private conversation, she held back. The most important thing right now was that her son had finally returned. While Elena was still basking in this fragile peace, beneath that vibrant veneer, Skylar was performing the most flawless act of her acting career. Hey, Elle, Skylar said, selecting a necklace. her tone as casual as could be. "Jax is your friend now, too, right? Like a real friend." Skylar stepped closer, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder with an encouraging look. "From now on, try heading over to the Rusty Spoke every once in a while. Jax said he'd have some special perks for regulars like us. Don't waste your youth, El. Having a friend who owns both a workshop and a bar, that's a privilege." Elena smiled, a wave of relief washing over her. She truly believed that Skylar was opening up, wanting to share that vibrant world with her. The next morning, the atmosphere in the small apartment had completely shifted. Gone were the dry thuds of slamming doors or the suffocating silence. In their place was the clinking of makeup bottles on the vanity. Skylar was busy with her own stage. She was dressed in a full leather slip dress paired with a cropped denim jacket. It was a vintage look in the truest sense, or more accurately, the result of Sky's habit of scouring thrift stores to save money. Even though the seams were a bit frayed and the fit was no longer sharp, Skylar still knew how to make herself look effortlessly edgy. The true focal point, however, was her face, a thick base, sharp smoky eyes, and a bold, defiant lipstick shade. Skylar was like a vivid oil painting, desperately trying to use color too. Mask the lack of quality in the canvas. "Hey, Elle, hurry up," Skylar called out, her voice having regained its usual vivacity. She glanced at Elena standing by the closet, then added casually, "It's just a casual group hangout. You don't need to dress up too much. Just wear your school clothes. Jaxson doesn't pay attention to all those frills anyway." Elena nodded slightly, feeling relieved that she didn't have to face a fashion showdown. She took her friend's advice, choosing the simplest outfit possible. A pair of well-fitted dark jeans and a light blue silk shirt, neatly tucked in. She skipped the heavy makeup, opting only for a sheer red lip tint, enough to make her lips look like a flower bud just beginning to bloom under the morning dew. However, the Elena of today had undergone a subtle shift, one she didn't even realize was a quiet instinctual act of rebellion. She reached for a small perfume bottle on the vanity, a gift from her mother that she rarely touched, as she gently spritzed it on her wrists and the nape of her neck. A complex scent began to unfurl. It started with the warm, grounding notes of sandalwood, reminiscent of old, knowledge-filled libraries, followed immediately by the mesmerizing arrival of ambergris scented the sea and mysterious wildness. Finally, it settled into a crisp, sweet note of ripened berries. The fragrance didn't scream or show off. It lingered in the air like a silent, intimate invitation. Elena stepped into the living room with a gentle, elegant poise that exuded a strange allure. She wasn't dazzling like a movie star under neon lights. She possessed the beauty of a peaceful twilight, the kind where any man would want to stop and seek refuge. Skylar paused for a split second as that waft of fragrance brushed past her. She sensed the refinement radiating from Elena's flowing hair and bright eyes, an effortless beauty that her heavy makeup could never buy. A ripple of envy stirred within, but Skylar quickly dismissed it. She didn't want to sour her own mood today. "All right, let's go. Don't keep Jax waiting," Skylar said quickly, turning away before Elena could catch the dark flicker in her eyes. Under the streetlights beginning to flicker to life across Philadelphia, the two girls walked side by side, one like a fire burning fiercely but prone to burning out, the other like an underground stream calm, yet possessing the power to erode solid rock. They headed toward the Rusty Spoke, where Jaxson was waiting, and where Elena's subtle woody scent would soon mingle with the smell of gasoline and motor oil of the bad boy. The roar of a motorcycle engine revved and then faded as Skylar pulled up to the curb in front of the gearhead's den. Exhaust fumes mingled with the chill of the Philadelphia evening, creating an atmosphere thick with a sense of liberation. Jaxson was standing there, holding an energy drink, leaning against a polished motorcycle. But today, he wasn't alone. Beside him were two figures who looked as if they had walked straight out of a film about American subculture. One was a muscular man wearing a cut-off denim jacket, revealing intricate tattoos that covered everything from his neck to the back of his hands even more than Jaxson, giving him a surly and jagged appearance. Standing next to him was a girl who immediately caught Elena's attention with her captivating contradictions. She had hair as vibrant red as blood sparrow feathers, with tiny silver hoops running all along the cartilage of her ears. Yet the rebellion ended there. She wore a tight black turtleneck paired with a pleated midi skirt made of fine tulle, layered under an exquisitely tailored ash gray trench coat. If you were to ignore the red hair and the piercings, one could easily mistake her for an art student on her way to a gallery exhibition. "Hey, have you guys been waiting long?" Skylar hopped off the bike, her voice overflowing with high-energy vivacity. Both strangers looked up, although they offered smiles in return. Elena detected a subtle strain in their eyes. It was the way one might greet an old acquaintance they were no longer particularly fond of, yet still felt obliged to treat with a minimum level of courtesy. Skylar quickly grabbed Elena's hand, pulling her toward the circle. "Let me introduce you, Elle. This is Jax's crew." She gestured toward the red-haired girl. This edgy beauty has known Jax since he was 20. They were colleagues, grinding away in old workshops together. So they're really close and trust each other implicitly. Her name is Andy. Looks pretty and cool, right? And this is Jaxson, Jax's childhood best friend since diapers. The three of them are all the same age, 25. Jaxson remained silent, his gaze fixed on Elena. He took a deep breath, and the pure sandalwood scent mingled with the ambergris from her suddenly invaded his senses, weaving through the heavy stench of gasoline. He noted the striking contrast. Skylar was flashy yet dated. Andy was refined but edgy. And then there was Elena. She stood there, simple with her light red lipstick, yet radiating such a natural elegance that it made everything decorative around her seem superfluous. "Hi everyone, I'm Elena," she said softly, her voice gentle but without a hint of shyness. Andy gave a slight nod, while Jaxson simply smirked, a grin that carried the distinct flavor of a city player. Meanwhile, Jaxson raised an eyebrow. He recognized that Skylar was deliberately playing the role of the connector, but he could also clearly see the jealousy trembling beneath her heavy makeup as she watched Andy and Jaxson begin to shift their attention toward Elena. The atmosphere in front of the gearhead's den began to stir as Skylar dove into the conversation with her signature enthusiasm. She laughed and chattered, recounting trivialities from school and discussing a new movie release in a high-pitched tone. Andy and Jaxson responded, their smiles never faltering. Yet Elena already recognized the cracks in their friendliness. As Skylar carried on, Andy tilted her head slightly, her hand rising to adjust a silver hoop. It was a redundant gesture, a way to avoid looking Skylar in the eye for too long. Whenever Skylar laughed loudly, Jaxson's eyebrows twitched. A minute movement, yet enough to betray a deep-seated weariness. The way they replied to Skylar was smooth, even harmonizing with her rhythm, but it felt like a script that had been recited so many times it had become mechanical. They never asked Skylar questions in return. They were merely receiving her, much like one might tolerate a familiar background noise of the city. Andy, in particular, occasionally let her eyes drift past Skylar toward Jaxson with a look of discreet concern, only to pull them back quickly when she noticed Elena watching her. The strangeness here wasn't in the words, but in the way they maintained an invisible distance, a circle that Skylar was always trying to step into, but in reality remained firmly on the outside. Elena felt like a stray note in this symphony of unspoken implications. She stood still, hands clasped before her, trying to minimize her presence so as not to disrupt their amusement. "Hey, were you planning on turning into a statue?" Jaxson's voice sounded right beside her, pulling her from her thoughts. He had approached at some point, his steps light on the asphalt. Jaxson didn't look toward the noisy crowd. His gaze was locked onto Elena's slightly flustered face. "I was just taking in the atmosphere." Elena replied softly, her voice dropping as the warmth and the distinct scent of gasoline radiating from him enveloped her. Jaxson smirked, in no particular rush. He raised his hand, his thumb gently brushing over a smudge of motor oil on the back of his hand before he asked, "Not used to standing among people who like to show off, are you?" "Don't worry, Jaxson looks intimidating, but he's actually gentler than those med students you meet every day." He paused, his eyes sweeping over her sheer red lipstick under the dim, yellow streetlights. "That perfume you're wearing today, it makes this greasy. Oil-stained shop look like a decent place, Elena. Did you really put that on for a casual hangout like Skylar said?" Jackson's question carried a subtle irony regarding Skylar's claims, while simultaneously serving as an acknowledgement that he had noticed her delicate effort. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Jaxson always knew how to peel back the things she tried to hide, turning them into a fragile yet weighty tether between them. "So the four of you you've known each other for a long time, right?" Elena asked, her eyes shifting from Jackson's angular features to the trio chatting away nearby. Jaxson stiffened slightly, a strained smile flickering across his lips before he regained his usual nonchalance. He cast his eyes toward Skylar, who was trying her hardest to remain the center of the laughter. "Yeah, you could say that," Jaxson said, his voice low, sounding as hazy as cigarette smoke. "We met around this area a few years back. Skylar used to drop by the bar back then, and she just sort of joined the group. You know how she is everywhere she goes. She brings the noise. No one can really ignore her." The truth was like a broken engine that Jaxson was deliberately masking with a newer, darker, and more raw veneer. He knew exactly why Andy and Jaxson wore those strained expressions. They weren't friends of the same age in the innocent way Elena imagined. Skylar was his ex-girlfriend from the days when he was just starting to build the shop. Her intensity used to be something he enjoyed, but it had since morphed into a persistent, suffocating attachment. Skylar didn't just drop by, she had never truly left. The overly bubbly, open demeanor she was projecting to Andy and Jaxson right now was, in reality, a clumsy performance. She was trying to buy the favor of the people closest to Jaxson, believing that if she could win them over, the path back to his heart would be much shorter. Jaxson, Andy, and Jaxson all saw through it. They could see every crack in Skylar's smile, sensing the desperation hidden behind her jokes. But all three were too lazy, or perhaps too bored, to expose her. They let her play her part, a tolerance tinged with contempt. Jaxson turned to look at Elena, who was still gazing at him with wide, clear eyes, waiting for confirmation of a beautiful friendship. He felt an urge to protect that innocence, or perhaps to pull her deeper into this game. She's the type of person who never wants to be left behind. Jaxson continued, his words half-truths designed to lure her in. "Sometimes I see her trying too hard to be liked by everyone. But it's different with you, Elena. You don't have to try. And that's why you're standing here, while she has to stand over there." He leaned in slightly, letting her amber scent fill his chest, masking the acrid smell of gasoline. In Jackson's mind, the bet had now warped. He didn't just want to win against Skylar. He wanted to see, when the truth about this tangled relationship was exposed, if Elena's pine forest scent could still retain its purity. While Elena was busy adjusting her bag strap, Skylar quickly seized those few fleeting seconds to step directly in front of Jaxson. She crossed her arms, her eyes burning with suspicion and a hint of pathetic hope. "Jax," Skylar whispered, her voice just loud enough for the two of them to hear. "I did exactly as you told me. I played the part of the enthusiastic best friend perfectly. So what about our deal? Will you go out with me? Just the two of us. When?" Jaxson didn't flinch. He slowly tossed his empty energy drink can into the trash, a gesture so deliberate it made Skylar's impatience all the more apparent. He turned back to look at her, his steel blue eyes unmoving yet harboring a deadly allure. Jaxson lowered his voice, making it raspy and heavy. You know I'm a mechanic with sensitive machines. If you rev the engine too early before it's warmed up, it'll break immediately. Our situation is the same. He moved a little closer, enough for Skylar to feel the pressure of his presence, yet keeping a safe distance. I will definitely keep my word, an evening with just you and me, in a place without the smell of gasoline or loud music. But right now, everything is playing out so interestingly, don't you think? If we ruin Elena's rhythm now, the surprise gift I have for you at the end of that date will lose half its value. Jaxson smirked, a meaningful half smile. Just keep being the stylish and kind girl you are today. When this play comes to an end, I'll be the one to come pick you up. Then the time will be completely ours, all right? Under the pale afternoon sun of the suburbs, the roar of 3 high-displacement motorcycles shattered the silence of the staging area. Jax, Andy, and Jaxson were already settled on their steel monsters, proud and rugged, their gazes fixed on the 2 girls, waiting for a choice that would determine the rhythm of the entire trip. Sky, keeping her secret promise to Jax, skillfully broke the hesitation. She smiled brightly and walked toward Andy's bike. Hey Andy, can I catch a ride? It's easier for us girls to chat. And honestly, if I sat behind these guys, I'd probably have a heart attack. Sky's choice was a smart move. Jaxson was notoriously difficult to deal with. His face always icy, as if having to carry someone was a burden, especially a woman. Elena glanced at Jaxson's prickly demeanor and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't want to turn this trip into a mental torture session. Finally, her eyes landed on Jax. He was leaning back against his seat, his rugged hands resting loosely on the handlebars, watching her with eyes as deep and fathomless as a bottomless lake. Elena approached, her voice slightly muffled. So ... I'll go with you. Okay, Jax? Jax didn't answer right away, just gave a slight smirk. A fleeting smile, so fast that Elena thought she'd imagined it. She had no idea that every arrangement, from Sky's position to Jaxson's dismissive attitude, were all pieces on a board calculated by the man in front of her. My pleasure, Elena, Jax said in a low voice. He waited for Andy and Jaxson to rev their engines and roar off first, leaving behind a space with just the 2 of them. Seeing Elena awkwardly looking at the towering motorcycle, Jax stepped off and stood close to her. The scent of sandalwood mixed with his signature hint of gasoline enveloped her.